China was the most challenging trip I've ever planned. By the time my son and I reached Shanghai, we'd already dealt with language barriers, unfamiliar apps, internet issues, transportation confusion, maybe some questionable food decisions. There were definitely moments neither one of us knew what we were doing. But we were just enjoying it and rolling with it as best we could. I mean, we'd seen some amazing things. We'd stood on the Great Wall, we walked through the Forbidden City, the Summer Palace, we'd seen the Terracotta Warriors, and ridden on the China high speed trains, which were all things that we really, really wanted to do. We finally arrived in Shanghai, and this was our last city in China. Shanghai was modern, it was international, very futuristic looking. One of my favorite memories there was actually watching a group of grandparents dance together on their morning off in a park. And one of my least favorite memories, I will never forget this. I got a Thai massage that made my already suffering bad back so much worse that I could barely move on our final day. Shanghai definitely gave me a memorable ending. Before this video is over, I'm going to show you how I paid for this entire trip, including my business class flights with lie flat seats using a combination of points, miles, hotel benefits, and cash. After Beijing and Xi'an, Shanghai felt noticeably different. That may actually be one of the biggest things I learned from traveling through China. Before I went, I think I mentally lumped China together as one enormous destination. But Hong Kong, Beijing, Xi'an, Shanghai, they all felt completely different. Beijing felt historic and monumental. Xi'an gave us ancient history, the Terracotta Warriors, and one of the most interesting night markets of the trip. Shanghai felt younger, more international, and much more modern. We stayed at the Hotel Indigo Shanghai on the Bund, which was a great location for seeing one of the city's most famous areas. The Bund is a popular area and gives you views of old Shanghai and new Shanghai with these huge skyscrapers. One side of the river is historic buildings. On the other side is Podung with skyscrapers, illuminated buildings, and the Oriental Pearl Tower. It definitely had like a futuristic element to it. We had more of the little hotel service robots we'd first encountered. By then, I had gotten so used to the robots. They were just part of China. One of my favorite experiences in Shanghai was this walking tour we took of the former French Concession. This felt like residential, it was very neighborhood like, quiet, quaint looking streets, older homes. And I remember going to a park that was all these like grandparents and older people socializing and gathering together. They were doing Tai Chi, they were exercising, dancing. It was just really cool to see this community come together. What I didn't know then was that the grandparents are really mostly responsible for the raising of the grandchildren while their parents work. So this was like one of their days off from work, and they spent it together in the park. Now, I promise you, I am not like one of these crazy Disney fiends, but I really did want to hit all of the Disney parks I could while we were in China. And I went to the one in Hong Kong, and then my son and I went to the one in Shanghai. Visiting Disney parks in another country is really fun because you're familiar enough to kind of know what you're doing, but there are attractions and differences that you don't get in the United States. After some intense traveling throughout China, it was kind of nice to have one day that didn't require me to understand another dynasty. Shanghai was about 5 weeks into traveling for me and the end of 5 weeks of travel. Unfortunately, my back was really starting to bother me from lugging all of the bags and items and doing all the walking, I suppose. So I decided to get a Thai massage. I apparently thought this would help. It did not. The massage is extremely aggressive and it made my back much, much, much worse. That was one of the things I really remember about this trip. By the final day, I could barely move. I was in so much pain. I was miserable. So, this is one travel lesson I can confidently pass along. If your back already hurts, maybe don't let someone aggressively rearrange your spine the day before you have to fly back across the Pacific. And despite that rather unfortunate ending with my back, this trip was enlightening for me and my understanding of China. There were things that were hard. There were challenges I'd heard about, but experiencing them firsthand was like, oh, now I get it. Communication could be difficult in some areas. Technology that would normally make travel easier sometimes made things confusing, and it was frustrating to figure out the new apps and get around the different firewalls that we were not accustomed to. I didn't travel to China just because I wanted everything to be the same as it was back home. I wanted to experience something very different and a different lifestyle, and I definitely did. Now, let's talk about something I haven't really covered in this series yet, what this trip actually cost me. Because when you start talking about business class flights to Asia, multiple hotels, moving through several cities, it can sound like an incredibly expensive trip, and it certainly can be. But I didn't pay cash for everything. I used a combination of airline miles, hotel points, credit card benefits, and cash. And this is exactly how I normally approach my trips and travel. I'm not trying to make every trip completely free every single time. I'm trying to spend strategically. For my long haul flights from the US to Asia, I used Air Canada Aeroplan points. My itinerary from Seattle to Hong Kong cost 75,000 points plus $89.40. And my return from Shanghai to Los Angeles cost another 75,000 points plus $124.50. I was flying in business class in lie flat seats for both of those routes. Business class is one of the places where I personally think points can be incredibly valuable. I don't need to fly business class on every flight, but a long haul international trip like this, it was something I really appreciated. I also used points to pay for my son's flights. He had a United flight from Los Angeles to Hong Kong that cost me 65,000 points plus $5.60. His return from Shanghai to New York was booked through Finnair, and I can't recall exactly how many points that was, but it was similar. He was one cabin below business class in Comfort Plus. Hotels were another big opportunity to use points. Most of our stays were with IHG, which includes brands like Holiday Inn Express, Hotel Indigo, and Intercontinental. In Beijing, our Holiday Inn Express cost 42,000 IHG points. My Golden Mile hotel in Hong Kong cost me 103,000 points, and our Hotel Indigo in Shanghai on the Bund cost 78,000 points. But here's the part I think is important. I didn't use points just because I had them. We had 2 nights that we stayed in Hong Kong as well at the Intercontinental, and I actually paid cash. That total was $375 for both nights because paying cash allowed me to use a buy one, get one free weekend benefit. Instead of automatically saying, I have hotel points, therefore I should use hotel points, I compared the options. In that situation, paying $375 for 2 nights at the Intercontinental made more sense to me. That is travel hacking too. Having the IHG hotel card also gave me status at the hotels. We were able to get our room upgraded 2 room suite, which was wonderful because we each kind of had our own room and our own space. I think people sometimes hear points and miles and they just assume the goal is to brag that a trip was 100% free. That's not really how I look at it. The trip wasn't free. We still paid for food, tours, attractions, taxes and fees on my airline tickets. I paid cash for some of the hotels, and I definitely paid for that terrible massage. But points and miles do dramatically reduce some of the biggest expenses: the long haul flights, most of the hotel stays, my son's airfare, and that can be the difference between looking at a big international trip and thinking, I could never afford that, and looking at the same trip and thinking, okay, maybe there is a way to make this work. You don't have to know everything about points and miles before you start. You just have to start learning how the programs work and how to use them for the travel you actually want to take. Oh man, China challenged me more than any trip I've ever taken. That's why I'm glad I went. I saw places I had been reading about for years. I experienced cities that were nothing like I expected, and some of my favorite memories came from just completely ordinary moments, like standing in a Shanghai neighborhood watching grandparents dance together on their morning off, spending time with my son, exploring this new world that we had only heard about. That's one of the reasons I keep traveling. The famous places may be what get me there, but they're not always the part that I remember the most. If you'd like to learn how I use points and miles to make trips like this more affordable, I have a free travel hacking 101 course linked below. And tell me in the comments, after seeing Hong Kong, Beijing, Xi'an, and Shanghai, would you go to China? And if so, which cities would you like to visit?